Okay. Number 3 reason, we have a lot of clients who are working in the nail salon. Some have been working for 2 decades in the nail salon. Now they're applying for citizenship and they couldn't study. The government say, how does working in the nail salon lead to neurological decline or memory dysfunction? What does that have to do with their lack of ability to study? Okay, and I'm going to explain that later on. If a person can work flawlessly, making a good income in a nail or hair salon, why can't they study for the test? I have business owners. They probably making more money than any doctors that we know, but they can't study for the exam. Okay, so they are savvy in terms of hiring people who can run their business for them. But it's not, that shouldn't be counted against them if they can take the citizenship exam, okay? The last thing that the government would return back is that what do depression, anxiety, PTSD, or post-traumatic stress, or being victim of domestic violence have to do with memory loss? Because there are a significant number of the Vietnamese immigrants have neurological decline, memory problems, and they couldn't study for the test. So the government basically are returning all of this medical waiver based on these reasons, okay? The Immigration and Naturalization Services also have significant mistrust in doctors, okay? Their mistrust coming from the perceptions all Vietnamese doctors conspired to certify Vietnamese patients to become U.S. citizens for personal or ethnic gain. Okay. Their suspicion have to come in even when a U.S.-born doctor examines the patient. The INS prohibits Vietnamese doctors or treatment provider from translating for their patient. Now, translating psychological concepts are very difficult because medical terminology sometimes does not exist in our language. So we have very good translator, very good interpreter, but they fumble and they stumble on psychological concept. Things like hallucination, things like neurological sequela, a lot of things are not translatable in Vietnamese. And as their doctors, we try to help the American doctor to translate, but the INS say we cannot translate for our own patients, okay? When the patients showed up with the medical waiver, they accused the doctor are not licensed because they did not know how to look up the doctor's name on the state licensing board. Now, all of our names, public information is on the state board licensing website. You just come into the state licensing board, you type in the person's name, and it popped out, they're credentialed, they're board licensing and everything. But because they didn't know how to do it, they accused the doctor for not being licensed. Talking about taking taxpayer time, right? They did not believe that the evaluation came from the doctor or the signature were authentic. So they asked the doctor to send in a copy of their driver license to make sure that this is the doctor who certified this medical waiver. They also came to the doctor's office to investigate. They came to the patient home to investigate. Now, I understand that there are always some bad apple out there, but you should not treat every apple as bad, okay? So I'm sure that there are people that misuse the system and abuse their power. but automatically treated everyone as such is very hurtful. Okay. They also want to know how much the doctor get paid while disregarding the fact that if the patient are competent to take the exam, they would not need to have any doctor's certification. They would not need to have any lawyers to represent them in court. It's quite an expensive process to hire lawyers for these kind of situations, as you can imagine. When they come to the doctor office, they ask, how much do you charge the patient? And when they find out that we charge all patients the same fee, whether they're Vietnamese, African American, they're Caucasian, they're Filipino, they're Chinese, they're Spanish, there's just one fee. And then they stop harassing the doctor. But I also want to point out, this is a violation of constitutional right. You really cannot go into doctor office and ask them, well, how much do you charge your patients? Okay, so it's a given. It's just part of the social courtesy, but it also is a violation of our privacy in practice. The state board does not regulate our fee for that reason. But the government come in and want to know how much we charge because they think that we're making a lot of money out of the patients. Okay. All right, so I want to talk about what the government questioning. Why are so many Vietnamese people have post-traumatic stress? What is post-traumatic stress? It is when you are a victim or witness of atrocity beyond human threshold tolerance, beyond your ability to cope. What happened to people that been through war, been through trauma, been through accident, been through abuse or hurt, they have re-experiencing the trauma in nightmares, in flashback, intrusive thought process of the trauma. They have avoidance behavior. They avoid places, people, or things that remind them of the trauma. They have emotional distress, such as anxiety, depression, fear. They have an overdriven nervous system in terms of hyperreactivity, startle response, restlessness, risk-taking behavior. Okay? When you go through a war, you cannot expect to come out the same person, right? Okay, so in post-traumatic stress, we have a lot of combat soldiers. I have a lot of clients that continue to have nightmares. They continue to behave like they in battle. There was a gentleman, he was at Walmart, and then when Walmart broadcasting the announcement on air, he dug under a shell because he thought, combat is going to break out. Okay. I love that picture. I just put that picture there because I love it so much. This young man, American GI, he's probably about 18 years old, probably just finished high school, probably had never served a cup of coffee to his mom. But here he is in a foreigner land, scooping up this grandmother and run for her life. It's just very profoundly touching. Okay. So these are some pictures of combat soldiers. PTSD in Vietnam veterans. The finding from National Vietnam Veteran Readjustment Study, commissioned by the government in 1980s, initially found that Vietnamese theater veteran, 15% of men had PTSD at the time of the study. 30% of men had PTSD at some point in their life, but a 2003 reanalysis found that contrary to the initial analysis of the NVVRS data, a large majority of Vietnam veterans struggle with chronic PTSD symptoms, with 4 out of 5 reporting recent symptoms when interviewed 20 to 25 years after Vietnam. Not only the soldiers are experiencing post-traumatic stress, the innocent bystander, the humans that been suffering around conflict zone, your everyday grandmother, mother, children, father, all have been exposed to the war as well. Okay. Not only going through wartime trauma, we go through escape trauma. There are people that, one of the estimation was that 500,000 people's lives were lost at sea through all of these terrorist trips onto the sea. So you can understand if anybody go through this, and when they landed, they cannot leave all of that behind. They cannot pretend that, oh, that was just a dream. I'm here safely. Okay? Yeah. These are some of the images of escape trauma. Floating in the sea. Some people, it's very sad. One of the experiences I heard was that a man has been catatonic for years. Person does not talk for years. As it turned out that during his escape, he was pretty much forced to eat his children's internal organs. You have to, okay? So children are the first people that die. And when they die, they salvage the internal organ. They bury the body at sea, but everybody have to eat in order to survive. So for years afterward, even when he arrived safely in America, had jobs, had family, had everything, he doesn't talk unless, he really have to. Okay, so that's how trauma is the very silent fabric in this model community. Okay, so this is what a refugee camp looked like after the boat safely arrived onto harbor. Maybe the Philippines, maybe Malaysia, maybe Hong Kong, maybe Singapore. They live in this condition for years before they be able to transport to a country that be willing to accept them. Okay, so not only went through a horrific 50 civil years war, not only went through traumatic escape at sea, not only went through refugee camp, okay, the people that left behind suffer from communist brutality. So Vietnam is one of the top country that being flagged by the United Nations as still having daily violation of human rights, freedom of speech, freedom of religion. Okay, so a lot of the clients that newly arrived to America went through horrific communist brutality experience. A lot of them were evicted out of their home. They were beaten up. They lost family members to police brutality. So this is the daily fabric on Vietnamese street. If you resist against the government, there are going to be physical action against you, okay? And then sometime your family will receive your body back and not even know what crime they have committed. Okay. And then The other violence that occur in the Vietnamese community, and also a silent violence, is domestic violence. Battered woman syndrome. Okay. I want to show you this picture because one of the ways that women are abused and beaten up in this society or in Vietnam is the use of their hair. Now, Vietnamese women have these long hair, and if you want to beat someone and not leave any mark, then you use their hair to swing them around, okay? So this action will create what is called an abdominal, a diffuse abdominal injury to the brain. The women can have permanent brain damage for life. It's similar to the shaken baby syndrome. When you shake up somebody's brain, and then they can have contusion inside of their brain, and they can be very impaired, but they still look normal, okay? And I'm gonna talk further about that later on. Okay, the rates of domestic violence in Vietnam. 2013, UNODA assessment of the situation of women in the criminal justice system in Vietnam acknowledged that 58% of women in Vietnam experience some type of emotional, physical, or sexual domestic violence during their lifetime. However, only 13% of abused women sought help from the justice system. The report recognized that patriarchal norms have created a society in which gender-based violence is often considered to be normal, and women are encouraged to deal with violence outside of the justice system. So when I was little, sometimes there's violent outbreak in our little subdivision, and I would hear women, children cry, howling in horror. Their husband, their brother, their father would be running around, beat them up with whatever they can. Everybody stop and watch. Nobody ever interfere because it's normal. It is just part of our fabric, our daily fabrics. So nobody interfere. Everybody sit there and watch, and then the women fell on the ground, unconscious, and that's when they come in and scoop the woman up and take her to the hospital. It's conventional, okay, for third world country. On top of that, motorcycle accident. If you have ever been to Vietnam or to Philippines or to Thailand, but Vietnam's have more motorcycle than any country in Asia. So this is what a typical regular rush hour is like in Vietnam, because everybody owns a motorcycle, everybody go to work, go to the market, everywhere on the motorcycle. And only recently the government start regulating and making everybody wear helmet. But 10 years ago, helmet didn't exist. So I received a lot of patients with motorcycle accident, traumatic brain injury, and this is a huge, very huge reason why.